You'll always be a renter, Mom. People like you just don't understand how equity works. My son David leaned back in his expensive dining chair, swirling his wine glass with a smug grin. The laughter that followed from his wife, Sarah, stung more than the words themselves. It was another Sunday dinner at their sprawling suburban house, and once again, I was the main attraction for their jokes. I didn't argue. I just sat there, my hand quietly resting on my leather handbag. Inside that bag was a crisp, heavy folder containing a signed property deed they knew absolutely nothing about. Before I get into exactly how I wiped that smirk off his face, hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been treated like a second-class citizen by your own children? Your stories always remind me that I'm not alone in this. For the past 3 years, my life had been a punchline to them. Ever since my husband Tom passed away, I had chosen a quiet, simple life. I sold our large family home and moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. David, on the other hand, had immediately bought into the illusion of extreme wealth. He landed a middle management job, financed a massive house, leased 2 luxury SUVs, and treated everyone around him like peasants. Sarah, his wife, matched his energy perfectly. She constantly made little remarks about my tiny space and my cute little lease. That evening, the roasted chicken tasted like ash in my mouth as I listened to them brag about their mortgage. They assumed I was poor. They assumed I had blown through Tom's life insurance. They assumed I was a helpless widow. But as my fingers brushed the edge of the folder hidden in my bag, a quiet sense of control washed over me. I wasn't the helpless victim they thought I was, and their perfect, boastful world was about a week away from completely falling apart. When Tom died, the silence in our old 4-bedroom house became deafening. Every empty room echoed with memories, and honestly, the maintenance was just too much for one person. Selling it was the most logical step. When I handed over the keys to the new buyers, David stood next to me, already calculating the profit in his head. "So, Mom, we should talk about reinvesting this?" He suggested that very afternoon, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "I have a buddy who does wealth management. We can roll this into my portfolio, maybe upgrade our house to a better school district for the kids." I looked at my son, realizing right then how much he viewed my grief as an opportunity. "The money is going into a secure retirement account, David. I'm moving into a rental on Elm Street." His jaw practically unhinged. "A rental, Mom, that's throwing money away? You're going to be a tenant at 62. I didn't bother explaining my strategy. I didn't tell him about the high-yield accounts, the CDs, or the fact that renting gave me the freedom to travel and heal without worrying about a leaking roof. I simply nodded, packed my bags, and embraced my new, smaller life. From that day forward, the dynamic shifted. Because I didn't own a piece of real estate, David and Sarah treated me like a financial failure. Whenever I came over, Sarah would hand me a broom or a stack of dishes almost immediately. "Since you don't have a yard to take care of, you must have so much free time." She chimed regularly, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. I swallowed my pride and kept my boundaries firm. I drove my paid-off sedan. I wore my practical clothes. And I saved. I watched them buy custom furniture on credit and take luxury vacations they couldn't afford. They built a house of cards, and they used my humble lifestyle to make themselves feel taller. But I am an observant woman, and I knew a storm was coming for them. The real trouble started when Sarah decided my time belonged to her. Because I was a renter with a simple life, she assumed I sat by the window all day waiting for a purpose. One Tuesday morning, she called me while I was enjoying my coffee. "Monica, I need you to take the kids this entire weekend. David and I are going to a wine tasting in Napa. Drop them off at your place on Friday." She didn't ask. She demanded. "I can't this weekend, Sarah," I replied calmly, flipping a page of my book. "I have plans." A heavy pause echoed through the phone. Plans. What plans? It's not like you have a house to maintain or renovations to oversee. You just sit in that apartment, cancel whatever it is. My grip on the coffee mug tightened. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I just breathed out slowly. No, Sarah. I won't be canceling. Have a good trip. I hung up before she could launch into a tantrum. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an angry text from David. Mom, don't be selfish. You know Sarah needs a break. It's the least you can do since we help you out so much. Help me out, I scoffed. The only thing they did was invite me to dinner so they could have an audience. Meanwhile, for the past 2 years, I had been quietly transferring $500 a month into an account David set up supposedly for my grandchildren's college fund. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank portal, and stared at the recurring transfer. Without a second thought, I clicked cancel. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a warning text. I simply cut the financial cord. If my time and lifestyle were so worthless to them, they didn't need my money either. It took them exactly 4 days to notice the missing funds, and when they did, the panic was glorious. When David finally called about the missing transfer, his voice was tight. Mom, did your bank make an error? The college fund deposit didn't go through? No error. David, I answered, wiping down my kitchen counter. I'm restructuring my budget. Money is a bit tight right now. I could practically hear his eyes rolling over the phone. See, this is what happens when you rent. You're bleeding cash to a landlord. Fine. We'll cover your share, but it's really disappointing, Mom. He hung up, oblivious to the reality of my situation. I smiled, tossed my cleaning rag into the sink, and grabbed my coat. I had an appointment to keep. My dear friend Linda, a seasoned real estate agent, was waiting for me outside a stunning ranch-style home on the edge of town. It had mature oak trees, a wraparound porch, and pristine hardwood floors. It was everything I wanted: manageable, elegant, and completely private. It's perfect, Monica, Linda beamed as we walked through the sunlit living room. And the sellers are highly motivated. I'll take it, I stated, staring out at the beautiful garden. Linda pulled out her tablet. Great. I'll get you in touch with a mortgage broker and we can… No broker, I interrupted gently. Cash offer, full asking price. Let's close as fast as possible. Linda froze, staring at me in shock. She knew I lived in a modest apartment. She didn't know I had carefully invested every penny from my previous home's sale, letting compound interest do the heavy lifting while I lived below my means. 2 weeks later, sitting in a quiet title office, I signed the final paperwork. The pen slid across the paper smoothly. The title agent handed me a silver key and smiled. Congratulations on your new home, Mrs. Burke. I slid the heavy deed into a manila folder, placed it securely inside my leather bag, and walked out into the sunshine. I didn't need a lawyer or a grand scheme. I just needed patience. The true test of my patience came during a family barbecue a few weeks after I closed on the house. I hadn't moved in yet. I was taking my time painting the walls and buying new furniture. To David and Sarah, I was still just a broke widow in a tiny apartment. I sat on their patio chair sipping iced tea while Sarah laid out massive blueprints on the outdoor dining table. We're completely gutting the kitchen, Sarah announced to her friends and extended family. Custom Italian marble, a commercial stove, the works. It's a $50,000 project, but equity is everything, right? David nodded proudly, flipping burgers on his expensive grill. Then he looked right at me. You know, Mom, since you don't have property taxes or maintenance fees, you probably have a little extra lying around. We'd love for you to sponsor the new kitchen island. Think of it as an investment in the family home. I set my glass down slowly. The sheer audacity was staggering. My money is tied up, David. I can't sponsor your renovation, Sarah laughed a high, irritating sound. Tied up. In what your landlord's pockets come on, Monica. It's just $5,000. You can skip the coupon clipping for a few months. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. They were used to David and Sarah running the show. I looked Sarah dead in the eye. No, I won't be paying for your marble. David slammed the spatula down. Fine. Stay in your little shoebox. Just don't come crying to us when your rent goes up again and you're priced out of the neighborhood. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, politely, picked up my tea, and took a sip. They thought they held all the power. They thought my refusal was born out of poverty. They had no idea just how literal I was being when I said my money was tied up. The trap was set, and they were walking right into it. The days leading up to the final dinner were incredibly busy, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I spent my mornings boxing up my apartment, labeling cartons carefully. The movers were scheduled for Monday morning. The infamous Sunday dinner was the night before. David had texted me earlier in the week a passive-aggressive reminder, dinner at 6 on Sunday. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim are coming. Try to dress nicely, Mom. I scoffed at the screen. He always needed everything to look perfect for his extended family. I spent Saturday wiping down my beautiful new kitchen counters across town, admiring the quiet neighborhood. I didn't owe David an explanation for my life, but I was done letting him use me as a footstool to elevate his own ego. Sunday evening arrived. I dressed in a sharp navy blazer, styled my hair, and applied a fresh coat of lipstick. I picked up my heavy leather handbag, ensuring the manila folder was tucked securely against my wallet. As I drove up to David's house, I noticed the driveway was packed. The house was blazing with lights, looking like a showroom. I walked through the grand front doors, the heavy scent of expensive perfume and roasted meat hitting me instantly. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile, immediately handing me a bowl of salad to carry to the dining room. Glad you made it, Monica. You can sit at the end of the table. I placed the bowl down and took my seat silently. The table was loud-filled with boasting, clinking glasses and David dominating the conversation about his stock options and his brilliant real estate mind. I ate my dinner watching them perform. I felt no anger anymore, just a cold, calculated calm. Tonight, the quiet mother wasn't going to stay quiet. Tonight, the tables were finally going to turn. Dessert had just been served when David decided it was time for his favorite routine. He poured himself another glass of wine, leaned back, and looked down the table at me. So, Mom, he projected his voice so the whole room could hear. Did you sign another year on your lease? Or is your landlord finally kicking you out to renovate? Aunt Carol looked down at her plate. Uncle Jim cleared his throat. Sarah just smirked, slicing her pie. I'm moving, actually, I replied softly, placing my fork down. David chuckled, shaking his head. Moving, let me guess, finding an even smaller shoebox to save a few bucks. You know, Mom, you'll always be a renter. People like you just don't understand how to build a legacy. The room went dead silent. The disrespect was so blatant, so thick you could cut it with a knife. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just reached into my leather bag, my fingers gripping the cool paper of the manila folder. I pulled it out, set it on the polished dining table, and slid it directly down the center. It stopped right next to his wine glass. You might want to read that before you give me financial advice. I stated, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. David frowned, annoyed by the interruption. He picked up the folder and flipped it open. At first, he looked confused, expecting a lease agreement. But as his eyes scanned the bold black letters at the top of the page, his arrogant smirk instantly evaporated. Warranty deed. Cash transaction. He read the address. It was in Oak Creek, a neighborhood significantly more exclusive than his. What? What is this? He stammered, his face draining of color. It's the deed to my new house, I answered clearly. Fully paid off. No mortgage. I move in tomorrow. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was absolute. His perfect image shattered right there on the dining room table. Sarah snatched the paper out of David's limp hand. Her eyes darted rapidly across the document, reading the final purchase price. She gasped, dropping the paper as if it burned her fingers. "Paid in full," she whispered, staring at me like I was a stranger. "How you've been living in that dump for 3 years." "I live quietly, Sarah. I don't live poorly," I corrected her, keeping my posture perfectly straight. "I sold the family home and invested the money. I lived below my means so I could buy exactly what I wanted in cash." David's face flushed a deep, angry red. "You had this kind of money and you let us pay for dinner. You let me stress about the kitchen renovation. You chose to renovate David," I replied firmly. "And you chose to mock me every chance you got. I never asked you for a dime." Suddenly, the truth spilled out of him in a panicked rush. "We need that money, Mom. The kitchen is just a cover. We're completely underwater. The cars, the mortgage, the credit cards. I thought when you passed, or when you finally admitted you needed help, I could manage your accounts. You can't just buy a house. You need to pull equity out and help us." Aunt Carol gasped audibly. Uncle Jim slowly put his napkin down. The successful, wealthy son was drowning, banking on his mother's death or submission to bail him out. I looked at him, feeling a wave of pity, but absolutely no guilt. "I am not your safety net, David, and I will not fund your ego." I picked up my purse, retrieved my folder from the table, and tucked it back inside. I didn't wait for dessert. I didn't wait for apologies. I simply turned around and walked out the front door, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own lies. The next morning, the moving truck arrived right on time. By noon, my boxes were sitting in the sunlit living room of my beautiful new house. I spent the afternoon unpacking, listening to soft jazz, and breathing in the scent of fresh paint and polished wood. There was no one to criticize my choices, no one to hand me a broom, no one to make me feel small. But while my house was peaceful, my phone was absolutely unhinged. It started around 3:00 p.m., a barrage of text messages from David. "Mom, please pick up. We need to talk about a loan. Sarah is crying. The contractors are demanding a deposit. You can't just abandon your family." Then came the phone calls, ring after ring, lighting up my screen. I sat on my new sofa, watching his name flash. A year ago, I would have answered. I would have felt guilty. I would have drained my own savings to fix his mistakes. But the woman who tolerated their disrespect died at that dinner table. I picked up the phone, swiped to the settings, and put it on Do Not Disturb. I walked into my new kitchen, no marble, just sturdy quartz and warm wood, and poured myself a glass of wine. I stepped out onto my back porch, looking over the quiet green yard. The air was crisp. I realized then that taking back my power didn't require a shouting match or a lawsuit. It just required me to stop playing my assigned role. I was no longer the broke widow. I was the owner of my life. And I was never answering that phone to bail them out again. Exactly 1 week later, a car pulled into my driveway. I was out front planting hydrangeas in the flower beds. I stood up, brushing the dirt off my gardening gloves as David stepped out of his leased SUV. He looked exhausted. The designer suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled sweater. He walked up the path, looking at my beautiful house with a mix of awe and deep resentment. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking slightly. "Please, the bank is threatening to foreclose. We need a $50,000 loan. I'll pay you back with interest." I looked at my son. I loved him, but I refused to let him drag me down. "David, you built a life on showing off to people who don't care. I won't give you a loan to save a house you can't afford. So you're just going to let us lose everything?" He snapped, a flash of his old arrogance returning. I'm letting you face the consequences of your own actions, I answered calmly. You are a grown man. Sell the cars, downsize, rent an apartment. It's really not that bad, I promise. He stared at me, realizing the absolute finality in my voice. There were no loopholes, no arguments that would work. Defeated, he turned around, got into his car, and drove away. I watched him go, feeling a profound sense of relief. I didn't ruin his life. I just stopped pretending he was perfect. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your own peace, you know exactly how heavy yet liberating this moment is. Never let anyone dictate your worth based on what you drive or where you live. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to set a hard boundary with family. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because my next story might just be exactly what you need to hear. Stay strong and keep building your own quiet empire. Looking back, the greatest lesson I took from all of this wasn't about money, real estate, or even proving my son wrong. It was about recognizing my own worth when the people closest to me tried to diminish it. I learned that you don't always need to shout to defend yourself, and you certainly don't need to argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay quiet, protect your peace, and build your life in the background. Setting boundaries with family is heartbreaking, but you are never required to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else's illusions warm. If this story resonated with you, or if you're currently walking a similar path of setting hard but necessary boundaries, please hit that subscribe button. We're building a safe space here where we share, heal, and remind each other that it's never too late to take back control of your life. Drop a like, share your own experiences in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and stick around. I'll see you in the next video. Stay strong and keep protecting your peace.